Further funding was secured from the Ministry of Defence, and the diving team returned to the site in August 2004.
2 pairs. Oh, that's brilliant, thanks. Okay, ready. Bail that off, base on.
The divers usually work in pairs.
Bail out on, bail out off.
They are assisted on the surface by other members of the dive team. Pre-dive equipment checks are undertaken before they enter the wet bell.
Okay, pneumo. Okay, sorted.
190, 190. On the funnel. Don't mind gas, thank you.
Ready to go?
Ready to go.
Any more toys? Bell secure.
In the dive control room, the diver's progress is monitored.
All stop in the bell. Okay, we're all stopping in the bell. Can we secure the bell?
I want to go scrolling up. See for the video.
We started by exposing a very short end of a timber that we'd found last year that was 5 meters long, not expecting to find that in fact there is a coherent structure that has fallen just to the west of it. Unlike the rest of the ship, which fell to the starboard side, we think now that a substantial portion fell out to the west or to the port side, and therefore that we might have much more of that side of the ship than we ever thought we would have.
What I think is particularly satisfying this year is we can actually see the very edges of the trenches that we dug previously in 1978 and 1979. And you can see exactly where the old trenches were and where the new ones are. But just inside the new areas, it's a completely different sediment. And in that, we're finding the Tudor objects. And we found that this bow timber that we saw last year is just 20 centimeters deeper than one of these earlier trenches. So it shows how close we were to finding it 22 years ago. And we've come back this year and uncovered it. And now we've excavated along the full length of it. And it's 10 to 11 meters long. It really is an enormous piece of the bow of the Mary Rose. And I think we're starting to get the final pieces and the jigsaw to show us what the bow of the Mary Rose looks like. Working from that timber, we've then exposed a whole new area of portside lower timbers, which I think is extraordinary. We really hope that in the future we'll be able to find evidence for the bow castle of the Mary Rose, but this is the lower timbers that we found on the port side, which I think are completely unexpected.
At the end of their shift underwater, usually about 2 hours, the divers return to the wet bell. They coil their umbilical before being recovered to the surface.
You got it? Bell's on surface. All stop.
Sails on board. Good.
I think you've got enough there, Castor.
All right.
Thank you. 3. Okay. Fantastic.
So what do you make of that timber that's down there, Colin?
Complete section of the bow must be down there.
But there was a bit of rubber hose
Yep.
underneath.
Just keep on covering it. I mean, there's more and more as that keeps going.
It's just going straight into the bank. Timbers are 210, 220, sided, moulded. So you're talking of 8, 9 inches in old-fashioned money. So you're serious size frames there. So you're definitely right on the bow.
I suppose. Black
And slate.
There's slate. I've seen some slate myself.
Yeah, that was probably yours that I found on the bank.
nowhere near there.
So it's almost a case of excavating very carefully there.
It wasn't just wood that was uncovered. This is the ring of a large anchor found lying alongside the stem. The overall length of the anchor was 5 metres, and the ring itself measured 80 centimetres in diameter. This was probably the source of one of the main magnetic anomalies detected by the earlier survey.
The structure we have down there is a large timber that runs off to the north, nearly in a straight line, and that's part of the stem post. There's probably a number of timbers making up that stem post. Possibly it's the apron behind. We need to have a dig down a bit more, but it's part of that central structure, runs off the keel. Either side, or on the port side, we have more timbers coming off. Those don't look like the frames in the bow, which are very wishbone V-shaped. These are more flat, so they're maybe higher up in the ship, part of the breast hooks, etc., with hull planking on the outside. The interesting thing is, though, we've got hood ends, which are the end of the plank, hull planks coming up as well, and the ends of those are very steeply angled, so that suggests they're from low down, and so it's still a bit, unsure what exactly is happening there, but it looks as if the bow's come down, broken over to the side, and sort of collapsed slightly on itself and pulled some of it away as well.
The amount of timber we found this year has astounded us. It's quite frankly much bigger than we expected, and the suggestion that the condition of the remains are so good that really it means that the MOD will need to think quite seriously whether or not they want to fund an operation to recover the rest of the remains, because they are worth recovering. At the moment they're collecting data on which to base whether or not they put the proposed channel in this route or whether they choose an alternative route, and so they're gathering information in order to basically cost it. We are convinced from the amount of good timber that we're finding this year, which is associated, so it's a complex structure, that if the channel goes anywhere near here, that will have to be completely excavated and worked. And the implications are, with only 2 years now before the dredging is due to begin, that if that happens, we'll have to have quite a long season next year in order to completely investigate a much, much larger area, to dig far more trenches and to excavate what's there. And I think, judging on the condition of the remains, that they're worth lifting and studying and putting on display.
This year, what we've really been concentrating on is exposing the stem and the anchor for lifting. We won't be able to excavate the whole of the site at the bow, which we'd love to do, but there isn't really the funding for that, and there's so much that we've still got to conserve in the museum, it would be inappropriate. But we have got enough funding from the MOD to fully expose and raise these last 2 items, because now that we've seen them in 2003 and 2004, they're really exposed to the elements, and then when we've exposed them we'll be able to lift them. But in fact the rest of the site we're going to cover up for the future.
The 2005 diving season started in late September.
Divers left surface!
Over the course of this season, the divers fully uncovered the remains of the anchor. Last-minute excavations were undertaken to prepare it for lifting. Earlier in 2005, the Ministry of Defence had made the decision not to dredge the proposed channel on cost grounds. These would therefore be the final dives before backfilling the site to protect remaining parts of the ship for future excavation by another generation of maritime archaeologists.
Although there's not as much hype and publicity as there was 23 years ago, we've still got quite a lot of people out here today. We've got a public boat with over 250 people in it, and then we've got the world's press in a press boat. We've also got helicopters overhead. So it's wonderful that we're still getting that sort of reaction and that sort of publicity for the Mary Rose project. And what we're just doing now is raising the anchor from the ship and also the stem timber. So it's very exciting to be out here in the Solent after so long. About a minute and a half maybe, but it's on the way.
Beneath the surface, lifting strops have been attached to the anchor, and these have been connected to a crane hook lowered from the surface.
The first thing you'll see breaking the surface is the block, and then the 4 strops.
Many of the onlookers had been part of the original team of divers who worked on the excavations of the hull more than 20 years previously. With the anchor safely recovered to the surface, it was stowed on the deck of Terschelling.
I think the stem's important for 2 reasons really, or 2 major reasons. One is that it'll enable us to put the bow back on the ship. At the moment in the ship hall, the public see a ship with no front end. And once we've got the bow and we're able to put her back in the museum in a few years' time when it's conserved, we'll be showing the public a whole ship at last, and that will be really good for them. And then secondly, the stem is a very, very major timber in the construction of a ship. When they set the ship out, they made the master frames and then the stem and the stern, and it was almost the template for building the rest of the ship. So it's very important both archaeologically and for the museum.
The delicate task of lifting the stem was going smoothly. Again, lifting strops were lowered into the water from the surface, and these were attached to a purpose-built lifting frame.
Seabed, it's still on the seabed. It's calling John.
The divers were recovered to the surface before the final lift. As with the anchor, the lifting frame was placed gently onto the deck. Terschelling would now return both the stem and the anchor to Portsmouth for conservation.
We've learnt an extraordinary amount about the Mary Rose over the last 20 years, be it about the ship or about the armaments or about the personal possessions of the crew on board. But what's also been extremely satisfying is displaying that to the general public, to bring history alive. And I think that's what the Mary Rose project is all about. It's just really getting to grips with the Tudor life, Tudor people, Tudor ships. And by getting more clues of what happened in the bow castle, what it looked like, what sort of objects were in the bow, I think again will help us to bring the Tudor period to life.